But thank you for having me. I'm going to talk about how I manage the Arizona Conservation District. So I'm the program manager. And when I started this job, we have 30 conservation districts, 25 ed centers. They all adhere to the open meeting laws, the Arizona election laws, and ARS Title 37, Chapter 6. And within those statutes, it describes how elections are to be run and how reports are to be submitted. And the system we had in the past, I would get things emailed or printed. There were multiple report versions out there that have been saved by past clerks on what they were going to submit. I had multiple versions out there. We had a Word document that they could print and write on. We had a PDF, writable, fillable PDF out there, but many districts didn't have Adobe, or some of them, are really in remote places and the Wi-Fi doesn't work and they're still on landlines. So all those things really contributed to me getting reports that were in all different manners. And then I also manage elections. And after the 2020 election topics and then COVID and reducing our interactions, I really needed to make some changes to the system so it could work for all of us. These are some of the things that were submitted. I'm going to explain some of the problems and the solutions that we came up with during COVID. It's been a multiple year process, but this is what initially I would get would be reports with different text sizes or handwritten notes in there. And I really needed to have some standardization in what was submitted. So we moved, ASLD created a portal in Salesforce. They hired a firm in India to work with the IT staff here. What we created is very, very specific to what the supervisors and the clerks needed. So we wrote a storyboard and we created a platform that is can be flexible. So as statutes change here, we can change the content of it. It's at this website. It's really easy for me to share it. If a clerk calls and says, I don't remember where to go, I just say, type in NRCD resources and they can find it. I can also take a screenshot. I highlight what they need to press, just send that to them in an email with the address and it can get them there. And people are starting to remember and are starting to use it. So it's working. Sorry. And so when they enter in their password and their email address, this is part of the first page that comes up. So it identifies that this person's associated specifically with the Apache Natural Resource Conservation District, and they can take action. First, it tells them whether or not they've submitted their annual report or their plan of work for this year. They have multiple ways to submit documents. They can use 3 buttons across the top, or they can use the take action button. And it self-populates automatically now. So now we get some of the information in there immediately for them. And this is my test environment, but the number of acres of the district doesn't change. So that automatically populates. It puts in the same contact information that was in there for last year. And just trying to streamline and speed up the process for the clerks to submit reports. And this has really created some consistency. I'm getting the same information from everybody now. The same questions are asked. And again, if I want to change the questions, I can, and everybody's getting the same questions. And this is the only way I will accept reports now, which is fine. But again, I've had to, I spend a lot of time helping people annually to get the reports submitted. Another problem that we have or had is limited access. So every district has a computer, many have laptops, but there's turnover in staff clerks and supervisors. And so not everybody can remember the passwords. Sometimes computers freeze and they don't have access to them. With computers being at the NRCS offices and then the offices closing down, people couldn't get to the computers. It really was a problem when you're trying to manage elections or get access to past documents, and they really relied on me to have anything and all that stuff saved, and I relied on them sending it to me. which didn't always happen. And even information about individual supervisors, sometimes they couldn't get to. So we created the Salesforce is a platform that's universally accessible because everything's saved in the cloud. They can, if they have access to their specific district, they can download from there, not only the reports or anything they've submitted, but they can also get to see, who the supervisors are. This has been a huge time save for me. So once they upload these documents or even send them to me and I upload them, it's all in the same place. So in the past, I have all these files associated with each district. And now I'm really just working in a virtual world where I can generate a report and ask, which districts have submitted their annual report for 2022. So I know who I need to check up with. That's really been saved a lot of time on my end. Again, information about each individual is also saved in the cloud. That means I can just pull up everybody's email and send a big email to lots of people, or just one person. And I update the email information working with IT staff. We're providing more and more access to the clerks over time, but there's still certain things that we maintain control of at this level. And then any personal information about individuals, which is documentation that we would need to know that they're qualified to be a supervisor, is saved under each individual person's notes and attachments. So it's in a secure, private environment. It's not like just printed or saved on my computer or printed and kept in a book somewhere. Also in Salesforce, I can communicate with the IT staff directly tied to the problem. I can put a feed in specifically where the issue is. So some glitches are that sometimes supervisors or clerks will make a list of 2 supervisor contacts and I need to have them merged. And so I can just go to that person's name and send a feed to IT asking them to merge those names together. Also, IT can just link directly to a document or a person's name to me and send me an email saying that they've some documentation came in for somebody and that it's been saved somewhere. And that's really helpful. Like, we don't need to have a phone call and try to describe the location of the problem or take screenshots of it. An additional problem that I had was a lack of accountability. We would get mail into the land department that would be time-stamped, with a stamp, or an email that would have a timestamp, but I just wasn't a secure system. I didn't, particularly with running the elections, I didn't know what was happening. I would mail out all this documentation, expect all this documentation to be mailed back to me. People would tell me that they'd done something or that somebody else was going to do something. And it just put a lot of pressure on me to make sure things were happening when I was expecting other people to do somewhat important jobs that are statutorily required. And so the NOCD community portal provides a secure and a recorded environment. So they log in, each clerk and supervisor is approved by me, and I provide access to their associated district, and they use their specific email address and with a unique password. And I explain to them that anytime anyone accesses the portal with that email address and password, it's recorded as you. And hopefully that encourages staff not to share their emails and passwords. Those approved individuals can review and submit reports. They can manage elections. They can retrieve data. If a clerk works for more than one district, I give them access to both districts. On this screenshot, you can see that Laura Cox from the Verde district accessed the program, entered in information about a supervisor, and then I emailed the supervisor, and it's all saved there forever as to exactly what happened. Once a clerk gets access for the elections, they would open up that first screenshot that I showed you where you could take action. And here they viewed the election homepage. This is a picture at the beginning of the election homepage. Again, it's my test environment, so Donald Duck is on there. But this is the election checklist that we now have built. And this was all built by Salesforce for my program with my input for the supervisors and clerks. And this can't be changed. Like, this is a program that has these dates on the left-hand side, are algorithms so that they change every 2 years in accordance with statutory requirements of the elections. But it's not an environment that I can change without going back to Salesforce. So IT and I work in just this environment now. So examples of the actions that the districts can do are to upload documents. They might need to inform the Natural Resource Commissioner on who is running, on whether an election is uncontested, or request ballots. Each time they click on the action button, it records that they access the election homepage. So action buttons that have a not submitted status, that's the X there, the red X, require them to submit documentation or information. And once submitted, the status changes to that green check box or circle. And action buttons that say no action required, that's the I. Those remain open until a date closer to the election that will allow clerks to access the candidate forms multiple times if there are multiple candidates. So they just remain open. And this all puts the responsibility of the elections on the districts and not on me. So I'm facilitating, but they're running their elections because all this documentation needs to be uploaded or submitted or saved. And they really used it. I had to coach, but they figured it out, and it was great. This is the first year we ran the elections in May, the first year that we used it, and it went well. So that was a relief. And the last issue that we had was this was directly related to COVID. I had to decrease interactions. So the one-on-one interaction of requiring notary signatures and in-person meetings had to be addressed. The districts moved to Zoom and Google Meets when they were with me, or they used conference calls pretty quickly, which allowed me to attend more meetings and have greater visibility, and I could talk about these things. But we still had a request for notary signatures on the oaths, and all the documents came and went via snail mail. So the solution was to change the oaths to affirmations and to develop a method to collect digital signatures. So the NRCD community portal allows for that remote interaction. I worked at the AG's office to change the oaths to affirmations, so they no longer say I swear, they say I affirm. So they no longer need a notary. And now when a candidate's email address has been submitted by the clerk back on the elections page, the candidate receives a total of 2 emails. This is the first one, requesting their documentation, which is a driver's license, a voter registration card, and cooperators agreement. And they need to sign that they're confirming they're running as a candidate. I get that information to confirm their elector status. And then they get a second email from eSign requiring the candidate to digitally sign their affirmation. The additional legal page, which is on the right-hand side, is also printed on the back of the affirmation, because that needs to remain with the documentation that it's a legal signature. And then I collect the rest of the signatures. This has really updated the whole election process, not only having the portal for how we're going to run the election and the responsibilities of the clerks and the districts, but having the documentation of the oaths. I mean, once they're in this format, I can save them. I mean, in the past, we were doing different things with scanning, and there's still a process to get the wet signatures from the commissioner and the Secretary of State's office. They've not moved to digital signatures yet, and there will be additional documentation certifications that need to go with that, but maybe eventually we'll be there one day. So in conclusion, some of the additional work I'd like to do is get a manual online, a digital online manual that can be regularly updated, and put that in the portal. And I will share that with a remote training with the clerks and supervisors. I also look forward to syncing the reports. So they're submitting the reports and the agendas and the minutes into View Center. And well, they submit them into the portal, but then I sync that with View Center, which is where we store all the current documents into permanent files with the open meeting law requirements. And I'd like, one day we're going to give access to the clerks to get into there so they can look back at their records into like the 50s and the 40s when they're created. Currently, they have to call me for all that information, but which is interesting. But one day we'll get them access to looking at all that. And then I also want to update the annual report and plan of work for next year. The questions that are asked, again, it'll just be standard and blanket, and everyone will have to do the same thing. So thank you very much.
Wow, Jackie, that is such a powerful piece of information you've given us.